Hey everybody, good afternoon. It is, I'm losing track of where we are. We are still day 2 of This Is Burnout. It is 2 o'clock on day 2, Tuesday the 10th of January, and I'm joined by my final guest of day 2, which is the fabulous Melanie Costas. But before we ask Melanie to give a little bit of an intro, and then we are going to talk burnout. We've just been having a laugh. So I ordered, it was sales stuff, right? And I'm not shopping this year, but it was sales stuff before Christmas. And this sweatshirt has just arrived that I was literally just going to wear to the gym. I've just opened the bag. It was delivered whilst I was doing my last call. I've just opened the bag. There's loads of other stuff that I haven't even opened. I saw this and I was like, I'm going to pink it up for Melanie. It's not supposed to be my colour. And most of you will know that I'm usually in my signature orange. But we're thinking I might do a bit more pink.
I think so. I think you've got to be, a lot of people get pinked up when they get
That's what Melanie said. She's like, oh my God, I've pinked Kelly. So if nothing else from today, I'm sure you'll learn lots about burnout and everything that Melanie does. And hopefully this is going to be a really educational conversation. But if nothing else, Melanie Costas has pinked me.
There you go.
Right, there we go. It clashes a bit with the lips, and do you know what? I don't even care. I don't even care. Right. Let's get on to Melanie. So Melanie and I are going to be talking for about 45 minutes or so. Again, we're talking about burnout. I think, as I've mentioned on a couple of these, when people were booking their slots for these calls, there were kind of 5 or 6 questions that were on there that people had responded to in terms of information. And I think this conversation with Melanie is going to be fascinating for all of us. So whether you're watching live or on the replay, I hope you get a lot from this. As always, if you're sharing or commenting about this, please hashtag This Is Burnout. Let's get cracking. So Melanie, before we get into the burnout stuff, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do?
Okay, so I'm Melanie Costas. I live in rural North Dorset, and I founded and the CEO of a social enterprise that is Dorset-based, national, covering England and Wales, called Rural Mental Health Matters. And the gist of that is to ensure that mental health and well-being is more equitable for all, basically.
Yeah.
That's in short. Yeah. And much earlier on, much more visible, much more available, much more inclusive.
Amazing. So yeah. And you say basically, but like that's a big thing.
It's just right? Never been done before. It's never been done before. You'll hear strap lines like there's no health without mental health, parity of esteem, must get to people earlier. But historically, funding and support has been set up primarily for crisis intervention, and that's not brilliant. Let's be honest, that's postcode lottery most of the time. But if we could just focus on getting to people much sooner, much earlier, way before they get anywhere near burnout, crisis, whatever. I was just talking to someone this morning about this, actually, that basically by the time you've sat in front of your GP or whichever clinical aspect that you go to first, port of call, generally it's GP, but some people don't. By the time you've got there, it's already kind of too late, because you could have been suffering for months, years even, before you actually even admit to yourself, let alone talk to someone else. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, and I do think that's an interesting point. So burnout, I'm going to make this point. I have mentioned it, I think, earlier this week already, but I'm going to make the point again. Burnout is not a mental health condition.
No.
However, burnout, certainly for me, burnout did lead to a mental health condition. And I think with some of the guests that I've been speaking to today and over the course of this week so far, what we have been saying is that the burnout has either contributed to a mental health condition, caused a mental health condition, or added to an existing mental health condition in terms of some of the stress and pressures that have gone. So I want to draw that point whilst I'm talking to Melanie. Burnout is not a mental health condition.
No.
And it can lead to those issues. But I think the point that you've made there, and that's what made me think about it, is pretty much, it's the same distinction. Lots of us, by the time we get to the point of burnout, in a lot of cases, I'm not going to say it's too late, right? We're still here. We're still doing everything that we need to do. But actually, for me anyway, a lot of the mental and physical damage had already been done by the time I was seen by a doctor. And again, if you've been watching this series from the beginning, I think that's where we kind of need to draw that point. So, you know, as Melanie's talking about the point that we get to the GP, I think for lots of us, by the time and again, Melanie's mentioned a really interesting word, that by the time that we are aware of it or we have admitted to ourselves, like I was 7 months into the physical side of it, 2 operations later, before I had said, or before my 2 consultants had said to me, this is burnout. And I still thought, you crap, you don't know what you're talking about. So I was very possibly years into it. And that's what you're kind of saying in terms of the work that you're doing from the mental health side. I love what you said there about making it equitable and accessible, because fundamentally that's what we all need, right?
And available and visible. And this is the problem. You see, from what you've said, burnout can exacerbate an existing mental health condition, or it can actually create mental health illness.
Yeah, as it did for me. Yeah.
And I think the similarities between a mental health perspective and burnout is that both of them have stigma attached hugely still in society. So when you're talking about mental health, or so many people, or when you're talking about burnout, especially when you are running your own business and you're doing everything yourself, you almost feel like can't say anything because I made that decision to start this thing. So if I let go even a tiny bit, then I'm not in control anymore, or it's failure, or I'm going backwards, and I need to be here, and we just put. I wonder if we put more pressure on ourselves as entrepreneurs and as than we would if we were working for someone. Not saying that it's easy working for somebody, because the pressures there are horrendous still, especially if you don't get the support. But it's almost kind of, I don't know, you push it back, I think, when you're running your own business. That's been my experience. But obviously my experience of burnout has been working for an organisation.
And we'll come on to that in a second. And again, I think from the conversations that I've had so far this week, actually, whether it's been a first, a second, or a third burnout, the big one seems to have happened because actually a lot of the people that I've spoken to have left corporate to then start their own businesses, and it's in their own businesses where kind of the big burnout has really gotten to them. Interestingly, and I mentioned this morning, lots of the people that are still in corporate or in large organizations, I'm getting messages from them, because the whole premise that I wanted to get from this week, right, was people sharing so that we could raise awareness of what it looks like, what the signs are, what we can be doing about it. I'm getting so many messages this week and over the last couple of days from people saying, you know, I'd really love to be able to share my story, and I'm happy to do it confidentially, but I'm either in the process of planning my exit from my organization, or I'm transitioning out of my organization, and therefore it's not appropriate for me to talk about that. Whereas actually lots of people that are talking about it, we've already left and either gone on to work somewhere else or started our own businesses. And you know, we've talked about some of the personality traits and some of the behavioral traits from those of us that are experiencing burnout, and there definitely seems to be a lot of similarities between all of us in that perspective. So maybe none of us were made for corporate anyway, right? Maybe we were all made to be entrepreneurs and should never have gone and been employed by anybody else. Maybe that's the kind of decision that we'll come to by the end of the week. I don't know. But you know, I think fundamentally we are all hardworking, and I think that point that you made there about the entrepreneurs, whilst we were in corporate, and we'll come on to you very, very quickly. I don't know if yours is the same here. Whilst I still didn't admit it was burnout until a very, very long time, and yes, there were things that I could have been doing differently, a lot of it for me was still reliant on the toxicity of the workplace and toxicity of the colleagues that I was in. So it was almost like, yes, when I admitted that I was going through it, it was burnout, but actually it was also burnout because of all that crap that was going on over there. Whereas I think when you burn out as an entrepreneur, or you get close to burnout as an entrepreneur, it's almost like you've only got yourself to blame. And I think sometimes that's where it's even harder to admit, right? Because it's like, shit, this is my fault.
Absolutely. And the point you made about a toxic workplace, wow, I mean, that is just unreal. I think I read some figures somewhere, and you can correct me, over 60% of people in the workplace are barely surviving, let alone thriving. And that's really, really horrendous. So obviously, how out of those people, how many are either experiencing burnout or approaching rapidly burnout?
And toxic workplaces are still the number one cause of burnout.
Absolutely. And then you've got the issue sometimes where you have a department that is very empathic and listens to you and is very, very helpful, but then they'll take whatever that their employees are telling them to the senior management, and it's, deaf ears, just get on with it, or I did this so they can do that, or it's the other way around, that the management don't know and they rely on the department or team that are supposed to be providing the well-being, and they're not doing it. So it's generally a break in the chain somewhere, because if you're supported as an employee, you shouldn't get anywhere near those burnout. You should be supporting right from the beginning. Anyway. But,
absolutely. Well, we'll come on to you, and I've got my mug here as well, Mal. So for those of you that are even listening to replay, Deborah Corey and I had an interview earlier. So this was as part of Deborah Corey's book when it was launched, Build It. Bad Bosses Ruin Lives. This tends to be, whenever I'm kind of talking about, I haven't had this out for a while actually on any of my kind of video calls, but I knew I was speaking to Deborah today. So I've got my pink sweatshirt for Melanie, who has pinked me, and I've got my Bad Bosses Ruin Lives mug for Deborah in terms of the conversation. So and I saw you've got a piglet mug, right?
I've got a piglet mug, but the problem is I've got Rural Mental Health Matters mug, so I've missed a point plug there, haven't I?
We're going to plug, right? If you're listening or watching, Rural Mental Health Matters, keep that in your mind.
Rural Mental Health. I've completely missed that one. I've dropped that one.
I should probably have a Kelly Swingler mug as well, instead of like plugging Reward Gateway or something, right? We're
not very good at plugging ourselves here, are we? Perhaps we should have.
And I've got your colours on, not mine. I mean, you're pink, not my orange. Oh dear. Personal branding's gone straight out the window today. But right, let's
well, never mind.
So, Melanie, so talk to us about, so you personally experienced burnout. When did you experience it?
So for me, around 2015, I'd gone from an employer that was almost 2 years corporate, and they changed my role, and I just, being disabled, I should just explain, I'm disabled. I have physical and mental health illnesses that restrict me, but anyway, so they were changing my role, and it wasn't disability friendly, let's put it that way.
Right.
So
the new role was disability friendly.
So I didn't identify that at that point I was approaching burnout at all, even then. Right. So what I did was I went and applied for all these different jobs, left, right, and centre, just to get out of the frying pan into the fire. And actually, that is exactly what I did. Right. So in the interview, I was quite open, because you don't have to be by law, but I was quite open about my disability, about the restrictions, about what I needed and what I didn't need. And the attitude was horrendous. And this is, I'm not allowed to say who they are because I went through a disability discrimination, but they're a cancer charity. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Lots of little things happened that I didn't really address, because you're new in the company, you feel like you can't say anything, all of these pressures, which, added to the whole thing exploding with me. But things like I wanted to contact Access to Work, which are a government, if people that don't know, Access to Work supports people so they can stay in work, disabled people so they can stay in work if they need equipment, such as desks, offices, monitors, whatever. And I got met with, wait until your 3-month probation period, which is actually illegal.
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
want to rock the boat then.
Yeah.
Anyway, I faced stonewalling with that, which was horrendous. I'd never experienced that before, ever. And it got to the point where we used to have big meetings, so big team meetings with the whole team and other departments. And this thing happened to me that morning where I started getting chest pains.
Right.
So much so, Kelly, that I thought I'm having a heart attack. That's how bad it was, okay? So
Yeah.
these pains were really bad. Now, being me and probably loads of other people, I'm still in my 3-month probation. I'm, all of these toxic things had happened to me already, but, this is big team meeting, got to be there, putting all this pressure on myself. So I carried on. I carried on getting ready.
Oh,
I
man.
ignored those signs.
Yeah.
And what happened was I drove to work, which was about a 50-minute journey.
Wow.
And on the way
Still
there,
experiencing pains.
yeah, I know. It's like an out of body experience for me. This is
And,
what
and I can relate again, when I talk about the day that I passed out on the train, I was still prepared to get off that train and get in my car and drive myself home. Had my friend not have been on that train platform and driven me to hospital herself, I would have got myself in the car. And when I think about that now, not only what I could have done to myself, but what I could have done to somebody else.
I
But
know.
at that time, that seemed like the most rational. Well, why wouldn't I get in my car and drive myself home?
Well, this is the thing, you see. This is exactly what I was thinking. My thought process that morning was, I've got to get to this meeting, not sitting on the side of the bath getting ready, brushing my hair in the mirror, going, there's something seriously wrong here. Yeah? No. What happened was I got hands free in the car. I just thought I'm just going to ring my mum because I'm quite close to my mum. I've still got my mum, luckily. And my mum said, "What are you doing? Still going to work? I want you to get to hospital right now." And I was like, "No, I'm not going." When you've worked in the NHS and you've worked in adult social care, which I have, that's my background. You're kind of taught not to go to A&E, and there's two reasons: either you're almost dead or you're dying, right? So I'm probably like the worst person to go to A&E. Anyway, whatever. So my mum was really, really going on at me. So I got off the call and I thought, right, okay. These pains were getting worse, by the way, all the time I was driving. So I drove myself into what I thought was the entrance of Dorchester Hospital, which is the county hospital.
Yeah.
This is how bad I was, because I drove into what I thought was the entrance, was the children's centre behind the entrance for A&E. I walked in, I didn't even notice that I wasn't in A&E. I just saw a receptionist and collapsed at reception.
Oh,
I was
Melanie.
in so much pain. They had to get a paramedic and give me, gas and air. I was in so much pain.
But important, I think, to reiterate at this point, until that point, you were still driving and on your way to a meeting at work, right?
It took my mother to nag me, basically, just to go and get it checked out. And even then, the intentions weren't to. So can you imagine what could have happened if I'd have carried on? I had about another 3-4 miles. If I'd have carried on going to work.
Yeah.
I've missed out something before that, actually. So before that, we had a couple of days before that. This is quite important. It's just things that pop into my head.
Yeah.
A couple of days before that, we'd had this big meeting, and I'd then been taken into the office and spoken to in a manner that I just can't even explain, talked down to, and just my self-esteem was probably somewhere under the floorboards. And, my confidence was completely knocked, and that's just not like me.
Yeah.
And remember, we're still in this 3-month probation, so it's just rapid how this happened.
Yeah.
But anyway, a few days before, I'd come back from this meeting, driven home, when I'm thinking how dangerous it was for me to be behind the wheel of a car, looking back now, seen a speed camera, a police in the side of the road, looked at my speedometer, saw that I was doing 40 and a 30, and just carried on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, not able to make the connection. Yeah.
On, like, oh, okay. What? So what I'm trying to say is, I was cognitively impaired at that point.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So anyway, going back to this collapse in A&E at Children's Centre, not even A&E, the paramedic then took me round, and I was taken into this rapid assessment area where they hooked me up to an ECG and everything like that. And still, at this point, I was thinking, I must let my boss know.
Because I'm supposed to be in a meeting, right? You're supposed to be in a meeting.
I know. What? Anyway, so I text my boss.
Whilst you're strapped up to the machine?
Oh, yeah. The consultant left the room. I get my phone out. So obviously, I've got this ECG thing on.
Yeah.
Probably not even helping with the results for that.
No, so I was going to say, aren't they the things where you're supposed to lay still and not even move?
Yes, but I just wasn't thinking straight, and exactly what you've said. And I text my boss, and the response I got was absolutely horrific. The response I got was, remember that you're supposed to ring when you're off sick. I said, I'm in A&E, I've got chest pains, I collapsed, I don't know what's happening, I'm having tests done, and I can't drive home. And that's the response I got. So can you imagine the stress then? The stress levels were just... Long and the short of it was that thankfully I wasn't having a heart attack, but the symptoms were completely mimicked. And it was something called costochondritis, which I probably said that wrong, which is actually inflammation of the chest wall cavity.
Right.
And that, surprise, surprise, can be brought on by stress.
Right.
And I was told categorically that I'm not to go to work, I'm not to drive. Someone has to come and pick me up. So obviously my car's in the hospital, well, the Children's Centre car park. So so no support, even when I was, completely burnt out and ill, really ill, from my manager. The response was, you'll have to ring in, otherwise it's a disciplinary. And just, I made that decision then not to go back.
I want to say that I'm surprised by that, and actually I'm sat here speechless, because like these things continue to happen, and I'm flipping my mug up again, right? Bad bosses, very lives. But if you have got a member of your team who is messaging, and I would say actually out of courtesy, right? I mean, and I would probably have done the same thing, right? And I did do the same thing whilst I was laying in hospital, thinking, oh, I should really need to be doing, even after I'm in the hospital admitted with this severe, but I'm typing away on my laptop, like I need to get these minutes of the meeting sent, right? It's like, what planet are you on? But you've been, and I'm going to say courteous enough to let them know, because actually that shouldn't have been your main priority whilst you were laying there.
No, exactly, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say you are being courteous enough to let your boss know, I'm not coming in because I'm laying
in A&E. I'm in A&E, basically.
I'm strapped up to an ECG machine, and you're told you need to be ringing. If you don't ring next time, it's a disciplinary.
Yeah. That's what I was told. And actually, I was so ill at that point, because although it was inflammation of the chest wall cavity, what I didn't realise is the worst thing you can do with costochondritis, I can't even say it now, costochondritis, whatever it is push. Because like I had so much pain here, I didn't know what to do with myself. So it was like I was pushing. So actually, I'd even made it worse. I was given really high strength opioids to deal with the pain. So I mean, I didn't at this point in A&E explain about how I was where I was, but I wasn't making much sense. And they said to me, you go home, you do not go back to work, and I want you to see your GP about being signed off, because you need to have support. But this whole time in my head was, I even thought, Kelly, oh, it's not a heart attack, so I'm all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you start to think, oh, I'm in A&E, and I'm not having a heart attack. It's nothing serious, so I'm going to get into trouble. I mean, really, I was really
Yeah.
ill, and not able to make rational decisions, as exactly what you've just said.
Yeah.
But it was the points leading up to that. But that was really scary. I mean, so scary. I really didn't know what was going on. I I can remember being taken from the children's centre by the paramedics. They had to take me in the car
Right.
to A&E itself and straight into a cubicle.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of the conversation. It's like it was an out of body experience, and then being strapped up to everything, and almost. I know that there was lots of people around me, so I must have been in a right state. But yeah, it was really scary, and it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that complete burnout took me months to get over. Months, not days, not
No.
weeks, months. And even, I mean, now I can talk about it because it happened in 2015. For
Yeah.
about 3 years, I couldn't talk about it without crying. 3 years. And you're obviously it was a discrimination case for disability because, you know, things happened like documents were changed that I hadn't met my probationary period. No, I
Right.
was in hospital and ill, and I hadn't done this task and that task, but also in a brand new role, I was given no support, no training, nothing. It was a completely different career change, and it, yeah, just the feelings of not wanting to go to work is way beyond the Monday morning blues or whatever people call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The dread, the feeling of dread that I have to go now. I've left the other job that, wow, I thought that was bad. I could have just stayed, and why didn't I? All of
Yeah.
those guilt feelings, yeah, to I've gone into this job now, and that this is my income. What do I do? I've got to pay the bills, right? So it was just horrendous. All of these things that you're juggling with, and yeah, the burnout just completely destroyed me, if I'm honest. So to have that level of stress in my life, um, to mimic what I thought was happening, which was a heart attack, was
Yeah.
really scary. And the fact that I couldn't make any decisions, um, and as in, like you've said, we would have got off the train and carried on. Yeah, I was, still getting dressed, still going to work, still going to that meeting, with these chest pains, which is utterly ridiculous. But yeah, and it unfortunately, I'd love to say that I won my discrimination case and I got millions, but unfortunately, I didn't even get my 3 month probation, so I didn't even get a month's pay. So
Wow.
I did do legal aid, and obviously I didn't have the funds to fight them.
Yeah.
I did do legal aid, and I did do a discrimination claim, but that took it out of me. And this
Yeah.
is the thing I want to say, that you have 3 years for any of these claims. And if it takes you months before you're even stable enough to cope with fighting
Yeah.
these things, it's just horrendous. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get anywhere there. But at least for my peace of mind, I did
You
try and challenge it.
right? Yeah.
But I think when I look back on it, because I started that in 2016.
Yeah.
That year, later on in 2015, I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia.
Right.
Now that's pretty bad, so I was really ill with that.
Yeah.
And
My
then
dad had that. Yeah.
yeah, so that's really, something horrendous. And then I just had to let it go in the end. I just had to, when I was told, do you want to pursue it further, blah blah blah. They're only willing to give you a week's wages and a tiny amount of money to say sorry. Yeah, I thought, you know what, and my manager disciplinary meeting, or whatever you want to call it, the meeting for the discrimination.
Yeah.
I had my union rep. So just note out there, you do not have to work for a company to be in a union. And I would say to people, join a union, because I wouldn't have been able to do any of it without my union rep. So, and I wasn't connected to the company. It was me just being in a union anyway.
Yeah.
So they came with me, and they said, "Oh, your manager and the manager above that person, so director, for goodness sake, they want to come in." Now, I said to my union rep, at this point, Kelly, I couldn't even face them. My heart was racing. I felt sick. And I haven't done anything wrong. And I just felt...
You're running on empty, right? So with everything that's happened to you, you're already running on empty. And again, I think this is the thing with burnout, right? When you get to burnout, you've run out of reserves.
Absolutely.
And everything that you are continuing to function with is almost like it's, you're kind of stealing it from tomorrow's energy and the day after and the day after. It's like you're in debt for like weeks worth of energy because you haven't got anything else to function today. Like you literally have nothing else to function, but to keep going, you are stealing tomorrow's reserves and then the day after's reserves and all of those sorts of things. So if you're then under additional pressure and being, I can imagine from what you're kind of saying, kind of forced into a corner and making decisions that you're like, well, I don't know. You haven't got the energy, like you haven't got the mental energy. You have no energy to be dealing with that process.
Exactly. And the thing that I didn't even, things that were obvious, it's almost like I forgot how to spell words. I forgot how to, I was reading stuff and it would just not go in. I just thought, well, what is the matter with me? But obviously burnout.
Yeah.
But my union rep said to me, it is your disciplinary. You can choose who's in there. And I was like, no, your manager's got to be in there. No. So I walked in and I said to them, I do not want them in here. Well, they've come all the way. I said, I don't care. They're the reasons I'm here in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't want them. Well, they've got to give their side. Well, they've given their side and it's a lie. So they changed documents and stuff like that. Your monthly probationary reports and stuff. My manager wasn't particularly too bad. It was his manager, the director, that was the worst. And it was just changed. Stuff was changed. And I was like, I don't really want to be sitting in a room full of those people. And when I think back, if they had have been there, I don't even think I'd be able to have spoken. It's like,
you wouldn't have been able to function at all. And I suppose, I'm going to say worst case scenario. I suppose it could have been even worse in that situation. But if you'd have ended up with those chest pains again, and that would have then become something else in that space, like you don't know, again, like you don't know physically or mentally what might have happened.
I don't, exactly.
Even more pressure in that situation. And this is
months later, by the way. This is months later. So
yeah.
I'd made the decision to leave after I'd spoken to the union about this, and they were saying to me, oh, you shouldn't leave, because leaving doesn't give them any leeway. So I've made the decision to leave in my mind, but actually doing the physical leaving, I just went on long-term sick, and I had to park all of that until this meeting. So in a way, it's like you're in limbo land. So it's months later by the time this meeting happens. And you think
it took months for you to kind of start to or get to the point of kind of recovery after the burnout. At the point that you were like, so how close to that meeting do you think that you would say that you were on the path to recovery from your burnout?
I wouldn't have even said I was anywhere near recovery.
Not at that point.
Because I'd experienced such intense burnout that I wasn't able to function properly from that moment on.
And what were the
And
kind of long-term impacts of the burnout for you?
Oh, right. Well, not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to do anything, feeling inadequate, feeling like I'm useless, feeling like I can't actually do anything. Nobody's gonna want to employ me because I can't cope with stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
all of the guilt and all of the shame and all of the feelings of how I got to burnout, I put on the fault of myself.
Yeah.
Which I know is quite common.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so that kind of made it worse, and that really slowed my recovery down. And what the positive side of all of this, because there is one, is that I now know that when that was probably the darkest time for me,
Right. Yeah.
because I've never experienced anything like it. I'd actually resigned myself to the fact that I'm not employable anymore. This is how bad. Not
Wow.
employable anymore. I didn't actually. There was a huge anxiety about going to another employer because what if they treat me like that, and what if I end up back in A&E wired up to machine and all of that. So there's this huge anxiety, and it took me a long time to get involved in society again. I suppose that's even the way I can say it.
Yeah, and again, I can relate to that, and I'm sure anybody that has been to that point can relate to it. I wonder if if we're talking to people that have never experienced it, right? Because some of the stuff that we're talking about, unless you've been there, can sound a bit like ludicrous, right? What do you mean?
I know, and people are like,
yeah, like why were you going to drive yourself to work for that meeting? Like why were you taking your boss strapped up to an EEG machine? Right?
Yeah.
Why? Of course, you weren't unemployable. Like, why would you need to withdraw? Right? You just had to leave your job. So I think if you've never been through it, and again, like none of us, and I repeat this over and over again, none of us put on our career goals. Right? I want to reach burnout and end my career. Right? None of us kind of have that as a goal. But likewise, we all think burnout will never happen to us, right? It's not going to happen. Same with some of the mental health stuff, and I'm sure you see this with some of the work that you do.
Yeah,
right? Never going to happen to me. Yeah. This stuff happens to those people over there, not to me. So if we've got somebody listening that has never got to has never been burned out, or feels that they're close to, but still thinks that some of the stuff that you're talking about is just like a bit too far-fetched, what would you say to them to really get them to pay attention?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, what I've learned from it all is to identify signs and symptoms really, really early.
And what might they look like?
So, for example, we think quite a lot that we're on, especially those of us that work in with a computer or the phone, which is most of us, right? That we operate the same as that machine, yeah? Where we can fill our diaries from the minute we are at work to the minute we finish work. And actually what I've learned to do, and this is what I would say to people, is to build in something that we preach called self-care. Yeah. Okay. And this is what I'm doing now, and I have been doing, is booking time off in my diary and booking. If I don't do it consciously, I'm booking it in my diary, because you can get swept away and I've got a space on Tuesday. Oh yeah, I'll book that. No, actually, almost taking a breath first. Yeah, because even a computer, even a laptop's battery dies, right?
Yeah,
it has to be recharged. You have to plug it in. So you can't keep going. And there's actually nothing wrong with taking out some time and saying to people and your boss, whoever's listening is feeling like this, there is nothing wrong in saying to your boss, do you know what? You've given me A, B, C, and D to do. I actually don't think I can do D or B.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can do that. Can I talk to you about it? And if they're a good boss, which they should be, that good boss should say, thank you for coming to me with this. How can I help you to achieve B or D? Or what is it about B or D that you don't like? Like, I'll give you an example of something really good. My daughter is 30 now, and when she was about 22, she went to work for this company called, oh my God, what are they called now? Lockheed Martin, I think. Yeah, that's what they're called. A brilliant company for mental health, by the way. And I'm not promoting them or getting paid to say this.
Yeah.
But her role involved 2 or 3 different things. And some of the things she liked to do and some of the things she hated and took her a long time. And she used to have weekly check-ins with her boss. And her boss would say, I can't stop the things that you don't like, but you are so good at the things you do like. Let's see how I can help you to like almost blossom.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, wow, that is amazing. One, that the boss has got an open door policy and a check-in every week.
Yeah.
And 2, that they're going, wow, she's doing well at this, whatever it was, project. Yeah. Let's give her some more of that, and because she says she likes doing that. Yeah. I'm not saying that they're going to give you everything that you like to do, because life doesn't work like that. But just, I think that a lot of people are afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back at not just in 2015 when I had burnout, but other times when I was probably approaching it, or something similar, not quite burnout, because this was like completely human broke situation with burnout. It's the only way I can describe it, 404 error in a human, basically. But where I've had situations where I could have spoken up but didn't dare. So these managers and these bosses and these people that you work with, they're people like you, and they're probably feeling the same.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes if we just were able to talk about it more, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is your boss shows you, or your team shows you, that actually they're horrible people, and they shout at you and tell you that you're wrong. Well, that's actually a good thing, because then you can say to yourself, bloody, what am I doing here?
Yeah, and am I the right fit for the team, for the business, all of that stuff?
Because, and everything I've been doing, right, to support this team, and then they're treating me like this. So it's difficult. Don't get me wrong, it is difficult. But once you start having those open conversations with yourself, and you say to yourself, I need to factor in self-care.
Yeah.
I'm worth that, and I don't mean sticking the telly on and getting consumed by soaps, although that can be a form of self-care. I think it's self-torture, but there we go.
I'm with you on the self-torture. We have
in 2010. I had an operation in 2010. I was 10 days in hospital with emergency spine operation.
Oh, wow.
And I went soap-free, and after that, this is what I call it. It's like, Soaps Anonymous, of whatever I've joined. But anyway, some people do unwind that way. But what I mean is not just saying, right, okay, I'm going to do something for you. That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say. Whatever that is, whether it's being with family, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's reading a book, whether it's starting a hobby, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's sitting down and writing a journal. And I'd recommend actually that everybody has a journal, because it's like talking to yourself.
Yeah, mine has literally been a lifesaver.
I think so. And I think when you've got that pen and paper in front of you, and you write down what's in here and how you're feeling, and you go back to it, sometimes you're like, who wrote that?
Yeah.
And other times you're like, oh wow, that was me, then, and I don't feel like that now. And so if you can't talk to anybody, write it down or do both. But yeah, I think that to take away how you can avoid burnout altogether, and it's really just to talk about it. Try and find somebody in your life that you are able to be open and honest with about. And lots of people have come back to me and said, in things that I do with Rural Mental Health Matters, is a lot in the community, have come back to me and said, oh, you know, I can't talk to so and so, they've got enough on their plate, and I can't, my family can't take any more. They're looking after a disabled child, or this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Actually, the main thing you need to think about is people want to listen, and people generally want to support.
Yeah.
And even if they can't help you, they might be able to point you in the direction of getting help. And even if they can't help you there and then, just to be able to listen to you will really help you. So
I think it gives something to them as well, right? I think when you feel, you know, like if you'd come to me and said, like, this is, I really need to speak to you. I mean, this is actually our very first conversation, right? But, you know, if you'd come to me to say, actually, you know, I really need to get this off my chest. There's something that I really need to talk to you about. I also think when we do that, the people that we are opening up to and honest enough to be able to open up to, they get a kind of warm, fuzzy feeling from it as well. Because it's like, you know, it is almost like I'm really grateful that you. I'm not saying everybody would be like this, but certainly from my perspective, like I'm really grateful when people feel that they can tell me exactly how they're feeling and when they're able to open up about that. Because actually, I think that shows a real strength in our relationship for somebody to be able to say, I'm not coping, or I need help, or this is how I'm feeling, or this is where I'm struggling, or I just need to offload this. For me, you know, as the recipient of that conversation, there is something that just makes me feel, wow, you know, and then how can I help? Is there anything I can do? Can I signpost? Can I help? Can I support? Can I, you know, what do you need? And then, you know, then we can kind of go into that. But I do, yeah, and I think that's a really important point that you make. If we think that, because we could all think that, right? Or Melanie's too busy for this, Kelly's too busy for this. But actually, none of us know, right? That's all just perception. Like, I don't really know if Melanie's far too busy to have a 5-minute conversation with me. So I need to cry or shout or talk or ask or whatever. Like, we don't genuinely know that. It's perception. But I don't know many, and I don't have any people in my circle. If I genuinely said, I need 5 minutes of your time, I know that I would get that from everybody within my circle whenever that I needed it. I appreciate that not everybody has that. And that's, again, why I think then the you know, the sort of work that you're doing is really important in encouraging people to talk, you know, to absolutely talk about what it is that they need. But you know, we just need, I think the communication is absolutely key.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can start to, when you're starting to, or feeling like you're approaching burnout, you can almost feel like you don't want to then burden someone else with what you've got. So it's almost like a double-edged sword, because you end up then making yourself even worse. Because and by the time you do then speak to someone, you're a gibbering wreck, or you're not really making any sense. And the thing is, the main point I want to get across is people want to help. Exactly what you've just said, Kelly. Generally, I don't know what percentage, but I would say it was quite high. People want to help. And, you know, the response that you get is completely different to what you think, because your mind is trying to trick you when you're approaching burnout, or you're in burnout, that you're not worthy to talk about how you're feeling. Keep it to yourself. It will pass. I can cope with it. I can manage. I don't want to put anything on anybody else. Similar to when you're experiencing mental illness. But actually, if you talk about things much earlier and much sooner, as soon as you feel yourself starting to struggle, then what will happen is you'll get used to that. And it will just be normal. It will just be normal to say. And from a point of view of my business, oh, wow, I've been really overwhelmed, and it's only taken me the sort of, I don't know, the second quarter of last year and this year for me to actually reach out. You've seen some of my posts on LinkedIn to ask for support, and I've been thinking, I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do this, I'll do that. I can't actually do all of that. So what's the problem with me saying, actually, I need help? And the response I've got, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that's responded, including you. The response I've had has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's to support me in the mission that I've got to support others. So I think at the root of it all is that people just want to help, and I liken it to, you know, if you're sitting in traffic and you're coming out of a turning, right, and nobody will let you out.
Yeah.
Well, that person lets somebody out, will let you out, and then what happens is you let somebody out of the next turning.
Yeah, it's
and
the
then
ripple.
they let somebody out of the next turning, right? So that one bit of support, no matter how small and insignificant you giving the support feels, because you might, as the person listening, think, oh my God, how can I help this poor person? You can help them just by listening. That's it. That's letting them out of the turning. That's helping them get on. So it's really, really important to note that you're not there to solve everybody's problems and fix people. People just want to be listened to and just want to, that's support enough a lot of the time. And even if it's just a sounding board, like, does this make sense? You know, or because even constructing something simple like an email when you're feeling like this, some of the stuff that I put in emails, I tell you, when I was on burnout.
Well, it's like you said, you know, you can't like the fact that you can't spell things, the fact that you can't make decisions, the fact that the decisions that you are making, quite frankly, like nobody in a logical place would have made some of the decisions that we make from a place of burnout.
Absolutely no. And when you look back, you think, what was that crazy woman doing, really? That's what I think about that. I look back and I think, wow, did I learn nothing from all the other little experiences of being disabled and, you know, feeling like you've got to apologise for your disabilities all the time, which is draining. I don't do any of that anymore. I just think, right, I'm going to speak out. I'm going to say things in obviously a nice way, and address stuff, and that actually resonates with a lot of other people. But yeah, I think there's this whole stigma around burnout as well that we've talked about, where people think that if they're somehow to blame and they're a failure, well, you know, it's not like that at all. And I think that when I was speaking to people about my experience, a lot of them said, I've never told anybody this, but this happened to me, And
I hear that all the time. That's what kind of fills my inbox. So yeah, I get that one. But yeah. Right, Melanie, I want to say a huge, huge, huge thank you for booking your slot, having the conversation, and coming to talk to me today. I really, really appreciate you sharing your experience, and I am sure that what you've been able to share will be a huge help to other people. If people want to find out more about what you do, rural mental health matters, or just find out about you in general, where's the best place for them to connect with you and find out more about you and your work?
Okay, so I'm obviously on LinkedIn as Melanie Costas, but there's also a website.
Melanie Costas, the pink-haired warrior.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't know where I got that from. And that actually, I need to say thank you to Dr. Nupi Aurora, because she calls me that. So I just put that in my title. But yeah, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope that what I've spoken about has encouraged other people to think maybe that they're not on their own and they can come forward. And in terms of Rural Mental Health Matters, there's a website and there's a contact form on the website. That is just www.ruralmentalhealthmatters.co.uk. That's
Perfect.
it.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have an amazing rest of the day. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and you too.
Thank you. For those of you that have been listening, tuning in, doing all of that good jizzle jazzle, let's let Melanie, there we go. So for those of you that have been watching, hopefully you've taken a lot from that. I think Melanie has really added some amazing insight, and particularly again around managers, right? Managers seem to have been, again, a bit of a theme for today. If you have liked this, please, or if you've enjoyed it, please share it with the hashtag This Is Burnout. Again, we want to create as much awareness as we possibly can this week. I'm going to be back for day 3 with you tomorrow. I may be coming from a very slightly different place. So I'm not trusting my internet today, and I need to ensure that I am stable. So I may be coming to you with a very different background tomorrow, from a very different place. But I'll be back with you at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I'm speaking to Rachel Hayth at 10. I'm speaking to Julie Turney at 11. I'm speaking to Michelle Hartley at 1 o'clock. And I'm speaking to Denise Bray at 3. So do tune in again tomorrow. Remember to keep liking, keep sharing, hashtag This Is Burnout. Thank you very much for sticking with me. Thank you very much for putting up with the technical issues that you have been experiencing, or I have been experiencing today, that may have impacted your watching or listening opportunity. But I would just want to say a huge thank you. Continue to keep sharing. We're making a huge difference this week, and that's coming across in all of the messages that I am receiving. So I want to say thank you to all of you. I will be back with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. All of the recordings, so again, the audio versions will be on the podcast within the next hour, and all of the videos will be on at kellyswingler.com. There's a This Is Burnout banner on my homepage, so you'll find the videos on the This Is Burnout banner. The podcast will be up within about an hour. The best place, I think, that seems to be linking all of the episodes as quickly as possible is on Apple. So if you go to Apple Podcasts, just type in Core Led Women Podcast, Core Led Women Podcast. You will see my shiny face. You can get all of the recordings, all of the audios from today's interviews will be on the podcast within the hour. All of the videos over at kellyswingler.com on the This Is Burnout page. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of my fabulous guests for today, and I'll be back with you tomorrow for day 3 of This Is Burnout. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care for now. Bye-bye.